I said one sentence, 7 words. I need to talk about something. His face went blank, eyes flat, mouth tight. He looked at me for exactly 2 seconds, turned around, walked upstairs, closed the bedroom door. 3 days, 72 hours. Not a single word, not eye contact, not acknowledgement I existed in the same house. Not for yelling, not for accusing, not for starting a fight, for using 7 words that every person in every relationship uses. That's when I learned the punishment had nothing to do with what I said. It had to do with the fact that I spoke. I spent 5 years in a relationship where speaking became dangerous, where needing to talk about something triggered days of silence, where expressing any need, any feeling, any preference resulted in withdrawal so complete, so cold, so absolute that I learned, systematically, carefully, to stop speaking, to stop needing, to stop existing in any way that required his attention, his response, his acknowledgement that I was a person with thoughts and feelings that mattered. I'm 46, I left 18 months ago, and it took me a year to understand that the 3 days of silence wasn't him processing, wasn't him needing space, wasn't him being hurt by something. I'd said it was punishment, pure punishment, strategic punishment, designed to teach me that speaking had consequences. That needing to talk about something would cost me his presence, his warmth, his acknowledgement, cost me so much that eventually I'd stop doing it, stop speaking, stop needing, stop being a person who required anything from him. That's when I understood silence wasn't him being mature. It was him training me not to speak. If you've ever said something simple and been met with days of silence, if you've learned that certain phrases trigger withdrawal, if you've started monitoring what you say to avoid being frozen out, if you've realized that speaking itself became the problem, not what you said, you already know what I'm describing. You already know how silence can be weaponized, how it can be more devastating than yelling, how 3 days of nothing can teach you more thoroughly than any argument ever could. And I'm realizing as I tell you this, some of you have said simple sentences and paid for them, have learned that speaking has consequences, have started staying silent to avoid the freeze. So here's what I need to know. What sentence got you the silence? Just drop it in the comments. I said blank and got blank days of silence. Let's see if we're all being punished for saying the same normal things. I spent 5 years thinking I was bad at communication, bad at picking the right time, bad at expressing things correctly. I wasn't bad at communication. I was being trained not to communicate at all. Now, let me tell you exactly what happened. The moment, the sentence. The 3 days that taught me speaking was dangerous. We'd been together 4 years when this happened. Living together for 2. Both divorced, both in our 40s. Both thought we were mature enough, experienced enough to handle conflict like adults. He seemed emotionally intelligent, seemed like someone who could talk about difficult things, who valued communication, who wouldn't punish honesty. The sentence happened on a Thursday evening, normal evening. We'd both been home from work for about an hour. I was making dinner. He was on his laptop in the living room. I'd been thinking about something all day, something I needed to talk about. Nothing huge, nothing dramatic, just something that was bothering me, something I needed to address before it became bigger. I walked into the living room, stood near the couch, waited for him to look up. He didn't. I said his name. He looked up. I said, I need to talk about something. 7 words. Normal words. Words people say in relationships every single day. Words that should open conversation, should signal I need your attention, should prompt him to close the laptop, turn toward me, say, okay, what's going on? His face went blank, completely blank, like a mask dropping. Eyes went flat, no expression, no warmth, no curiosity. Just flat, empty, gone. He looked at me for exactly 2 seconds, long enough for me to see the blankness, long enough for me to feel my stomach drop. Then he closed the laptop, stood up, didn't say a word, walked past me, went upstairs. I heard the bedroom door close. I stood there, confused, frozen, replaying the moment, trying to figure out what had just happened, what I'd done wrong, how 7 words had triggered that response. I waited 5 minutes, went upstairs, knocked on the bedroom door, said his name, no response, opened the door. He was lying on the bed, facing the wall, earbuds in. I said his name again, no response. I said, "Are you okay? Did I do something wrong?" No response, not a movement, not an acknowledgement. Friday morning, I woke up. He was already gone. Left for work without waking me, without a note, without anything. I texted him, "Are you okay? Can we talk?" No response. Texted again around lunch. "I'm sorry if I upset you. I didn't mean to. Can you let me know you're okay?" No response. He came home around 6, walked past me, went upstairs. Stayed there the rest of the night. Saturday, he was up early. Made coffee, didn't make me any. Took his cup. Went to his office, closed the door. I knocked, no response. I opened the door, said, "Can we please talk about what's happening?" He didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge I'd spoken. Just sat there, staring at his computer screen. I stood there for 30 seconds, nothing, left, closed the door. Sunday morning. 3rd day, 72 hours. I woke up and he was sitting at the kitchen table, reading on his phone. I walked in, made coffee. My hands were shaking. I sat down across from him, said quietly, carefully, "Are you ever going to speak to me again?" He looked up, looked at me like I was being dramatic, like I was overreacting. Said, "I needed space. You always do this. You always make things a bigger deal than they need to be." That was his explanation. He needed space. After 3 days of complete silence, after 72 hours of treating me like I didn't exist, after making me panic, apologize, beg for acknowledgement, and somehow this was my fault. I'd made things a bigger deal than they needed to be by saying I needed to talk about something. That was the first time, but it wasn't the last. Year 4, it happened again. Different sentence, same response. I'd said, "Can we discuss something this weekend?" Simple request. Reasonable question. His face went blank, the same flatness, the same disappearance behind his eyes. This time the silence lasted 5 days. 5 days. Longer than the first time, colder, more complete, more devastating. I apologized on day 2, apologized on day 3, apologized on day 4. Didn't even know what I was apologizing for anymore. Just knew I needed it to stop. Needed him to acknowledge I existed. Needed the freeze to end. Day 5, he spoke. Sad. I just needed time to think. No explanation what he was thinking about. No acknowledgement that 5 days of complete silence might be extreme. Just needed time. And I've learned the lesson again. Deeper this time. More thorough. Speaking costs. Needing to talk costs. Expressing anything costs. Month 53, I said, "I'd like to talk about our vacation plans." 9 words. Polite words. Planning words. The silence lasted 4 days. Month 57, I said, "Can we talk about the budget?" 6 words. Practical words. Necessary words. 3 days of silence. Month 60, I said, "I need to discuss something that's bothering me." 10 words. Honest words. Vulnerable words. 6 days. The longest one yet. That's when I realized it wasn't about what I said. It was about the fact that I spoke. That I needed something. That I required his attention. That I existed as a person with thoughts and needs and feelings that deserved acknowledgement. Every variation of "I need to talk" triggered the same response. The blank face, the withdrawal, the days of silence, the punishment for speaking. I started avoiding those phrases entirely. Started trying to bring things up differently, more casually, without announcing I needed to talk. Would mention things while we were doing other things, while making dinner. while watching TV, trying to sneak the conversation in without triggering the freeze. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. The rules weren't clear. The triggers weren't predictable. I just knew that certain words, certain requests for his attention, certain acknowledgments that I had something I needed to discuss, those things were dangerous. Year 5, I stopped bringing things up at all. Stopped needing to talk about things. Stopped having things that bothered me enough to discuss. Not because those things went away, because the cost of discussing them was too high. The silence, the days of being invisible, the panic, the desperate apologizing, that cost was higher than whatever I needed to talk about. So I stopped talking, stopped needing, stopped being someone who required attention, response, acknowledgement. My sister visited that year. We were having coffee in the kitchen. He walked through. I immediately went quiet. Stopped mid-sentence, waited for him to leave the room. My sister noticed, said, "Why did you stop talking?" I said, "I don't know, I just did." She said, "You do that a lot now?" Stop talking when he's around. Like you're afraid to speak? She was right. I was afraid to speak. Afraid that anything I said might trigger the blank face, the withdrawal, the silence. Afraid that existing out loud might cost me days of invisibility. I'd become someone who only spoke when it was safe, when he was in a good mood, when the risk felt manageable. I'd become silent, small, invisible, someone who existed in the house but didn't speak, didn't need, didn't require anything. My sister said, "You're different now. You're like a ghost. You're here, but you're not really here. You never talk about anything real anymore. You never mention if something's bothering you. You never say you need anything. What happened to you?" I didn't know how to explain. Didn't know how to say that I'd been trained out of speaking. That 5 years of silence as punishment had taught me that my words, my needs, my existence as someone who required attention was dangerous. That I'd learned thoroughly, systematically, that speaking had consequences I couldn't bear to face. So it stopped, become a ghost. Existed silently in a house where my voice had become too expensive to use. Month 63 something broke. He wanted me to cancel plans with my daughter. Last minute thing, expected me to just do it. I said, "I'd rather not, if that's okay." I haven't seen her in a month. Simple boundary, simple preference, simple statement of what I wanted. His face went blank, the blank I recognized immediately. The blank that preceded days of silence. The blank that meant I'd spoken when I should have stayed quiet. I watched it happen. Watched the mask drop. Watched the eyes go flat. And something in me just snapped. I said, "Are you seriously about to not speak to me because I said I'd rather not cancel on my daughter?" He said, "I'm not going to not speak to you. I just need to think about this." I said, "No, you're doing it right now. The thing you do." The silence, the withdrawal, the punishment for speaking. I can see it happening. Your face is already blank. You're already gone. And I haven't even done anything except say I'd rather not. He said, "You're being paranoid. I'm just processing." I said, "For how many days this time? 3, 5, 6? How long do I disappear for saying I'd rather not cancel plans with my daughter?" He looked shocked, like I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to see, like I'd named something that was supposed to stay invisible. He said, "I don't do that. You're making me into something I'm not." I said, "Yes, you do. You've done it for 5 years. Every time I say I need to talk about something, every time I express a preference, every time I have a boundary, you go silent for days and I panic and apologize and learn not to speak. That's what you do. That's what you've been doing." He tried to deny it, said I was imagining things, making him into a villain. I said, 4 years ago I said I need to talk about something and you didn't speak to me for 3 days. I never got to say what I needed to talk about. I spent 72 hours panicking, apologizing for using 7 words. That happened. That's real. That's what you do. And I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not apologizing for speaking. I'm not staying quiet to avoid your silence. I'm done. The silence after that lasted 8 days. The longest one, the final one. The punishment for naming the pattern, for seeing it clearly, for refusing to pretend it wasn't happening. 8 days of the most complete silence yet. 8 days of him existing in the house like I was invisible, like I was nothing, like I hadn't spoken truth he couldn't deny. Month 64, I left. Told him I couldn't stay in a relationship where speaking was dangerous, where needing to talk about something triggered days of silence, where expressing preferences or boundaries resulted in withdrawal so complete I learned to stop having preferences, stop having boundaries, stop speaking at all. He said I was overreacting. Making him into something he wasn't, said everyone needs space sometimes. I said space is something you ask for with words. Silence is something you inflict as punishment, and I've been punished enough for the crime of speaking. For the crime of needing to talk about things, for the crime of existing as a person who has thoughts and feelings and needs. I'm done being punished for having a voice. I'm leaving. 80 months out, I'm learning to speak again. Learning to say I need to talk about something without my stomach dropping, without panic, without waiting for the blank face, the withdrawal, the days of silence. The rehabilitation is slow. The training went deep. I still catch myself monitoring my words. Still catch myself avoiding certain phrases. Still catch myself staying silent to avoid consequences that don't exist anymore. I'm learning that healthy people don't punish speaking, don't weaponize silence, don't make you disappear for needing to talk about something. That the right person won't train you out of communicating, won't teach you that expressing needs is dangerous, won't make you choose between speaking or existing in their world. That silence isn't a weapon, that needing to talk isn't a crime, that using 7 normal words shouldn't cost you 3 days of existence. Hear what I desperately wish someone had told me the first time. I said 7 words and got 3 days of silence if someone withdraws completely goes silent for days treats. You like you're invisible because you said you needed to talk about something? That's not them processing, that's not them needing space, that's not them being hurt, that's punishment, that's training. That's them teaching you that speaking has consequences so severe you'll learn not to speak, and that teaching, that training, that weaponized silence, that's not communication difficulty, that's not emotional immaturity, that's control over your voice, over your needs, over your existence in the relationship. If you're rereading this and you're afraid to say, I need to talk about something, if you've learned that certain phrases trigger days of silence, if you monitor your words to avoid withdrawal, if you've started staying silent to avoid being frozen out, if you've realized that speaking itself became the problem, you're not bad at communication, you're being trained not to communicate. And that training, that silence, that punishment for speaking, you don't have to live with that. Speaking shouldn't be dangerous. Needing to talk shouldn't trigger exile. Expressing yourself shouldn't cost you days of existence. If this resonated, if you've been punished with silence for speaking, the next video is crucial. It's called The Day I Stopped Explaining Myself. Everything changed. It's about what happens when you stop explaining your choices, stop justifying your decisions, stop defending yourself constantly. When you just say no, or I've decided, or this is what I want without explanation, without defense, without constant justification. And how that refusal to explain, that simple boundary, changed everything, revealed everything, showed you exactly what the relationship was built on. Link is on screen now.